Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Super Tees video. And obviously, there were a lot of changes that came in for this week, and I wanted to at least give it a day of playing the ladder myself, as well as observing some of the highest level of players to see where the specializations have landed after this first week of class tuning. This tier list is going to be oriented around ladder gameplay on the solo shuffle ladder, taking into consideration what is possible and the full potential of every specialization when it is maximized and realized. So, Affliction Warlock, this specialization received some significant nerfs to its Shadow Bolt and its Haunt damage, and I do think that this is noticeable. I think its own personal finishing power is much lower, and it still does have significant weaknesses against a lot of melee DPS, which are very predominant at the moment. Things like Death Knights, and still even the case of something like a Fury Warrior or a Windwalker Monk. These melee DPS can be very difficult to deal with. So I do think that because it has counters, that it is not going to be going on to the God tier as I was previously putting it onto. However, I still do think that when you've maximized its potential, maximized its ability to kite and avoid damage, that its pressure is still substantially high. So for me, it's still going to be an S tier specialization. Arcane Mage is just hitting nerf after nerf after nerf after nerf. Even on literally on the last couple of hours before Tuesday, it got like a 6% nerf or something to its Arcane Blast damage. So you guys just can't avoid being nerfed. I think this is mostly because of PvE. And then on top of that, with Frost Mage not receiving any nerfs, when you're deciding between the mage specializations, you're just keeping to go stocks going down. Frost Mage is still staying high. So I do think Arcane is starting to fall off quite a bit. I think that with Hunters and pretty much every single spec of Hunter being as good as they are right now, and Feral Druid being as good as it is right now, and even Enhancement Shaman starting to level up, that solo shuffle compositions can actually be very difficult to win as Arcane. Now, mage specs, they dominate when it's like Warriors, Ret Paladins, and even some case Demon Hunters. These kind of like melee ranged, close ranged melee that don't really have a lot of ranged kicks or ability to do ranged damage or limited purges. They win in those lobbies, but those classes aren't doing spectacularly. So for me, Arcane, I want to say like when you maximize its potential, like I've seen like the best Arcane mages in the game, you can do some remarkable stuff, but I think it's going to start to feel a little bit lackluster. Arms Warrior, I think, is doing really badly in solo shuffle. I think that it's gotten a lot better, maybe in some other brackets where you can be more coordinated. But in solo shuffle specifically, whenever I see an Arms Warrior, they're pretty much almost always going like 0-6 or 2-4, some score that's just not really great. And obviously copying a 10% Bladestorm nerf on top of already not being in a great position isn't going to be fantastic. So for me in solo shuffle 3v3, which is solo queue arena, they're coming in at C tier. I think that they're very easy to deal with at the moment. They might excel in some cleave lobbies where you get like Death Knights and other classes, but again, not a lot of those classes are performing really well, so getting those lobbies happens more infrequently. I think it just gets kited by a lot of the best classes. Again, Hunter being as good as it is, Frost Mage being as good as it is, even Ellie Shaman to some extent being as good as it is, makes it really difficult to succeed as a warrior. Assassination Rogue, on the other hand, I think is God tier. This class can absolutely run people down. It does a remarkable amount of burst damage. It is crazy strong at the moment. Do not underestimate it. The rogue specs are absolute monsters. However, I will say with rogues, unlike Ret Paladins, if you're just starting out on it, you're probably not going to see initial success. This is kind of like a investment. It's going to be the payout in the late game. In the early game, it's going to be a lot of pain figuring out how it works and how it plays. But they are reworking Rogue as well in 11.0.5, which is likely going to make it a lot simpler. I'm actually somewhat having predictions that Rogue could get converted into how Ret Paladin is as far as gameplay is concerned. So then they could be simple and absolute monsters at the same time. That's going to be really scary in the future. But right now, the assessment, I still think that rogues are great. I think almost every spec of Rogue is phenomenal. Balanced Druid, I've been playing this. In Battlegrounds, you definitely have a niche in the highest levels of the ladder for Battleground Blitz, but in Arena Solo Shuffle, you are just a paper tiger. You are just so squishy. You fall over to a gust of wind. It is really tough to stay alive, and I think I'm the number 2 Boomkin. Been trying to get the number 1 Boomkin, but it is really tough at the moment. If you are not literally the best of your class, you are not going to have a good ride with this one at all. You can play AoE builds, which are fun. I think the Starfall build is probably like the strongest thing about it at the moment. But that's only good when you get classes that it synergizes with, things like Affliction Warlock or Shadow Priest, and even Unholy Death Knight. But you just get ran down It's just very difficult to stay alive. Any amount of CC on your healer, and it's like pretty much lights out for you. So because of its survivability being so low at the moment, I'm putting it on B tier. Damage is remarkable. It can compete with these specs in S and God for sure. If the enemy team is just unaware that you're in the game and not targeting you, you could probably have a really good run. But as soon as you start getting targeted, it becomes really difficult. Beast Mastery Hunter was a hotly contested one. Like, where was it going to go? Previously, it was here, right? It was here on D. But now I'm pretty comfortably saying that I think it's on A tier. I don't think it's better than Marksmanship Hunter, but I do think its damage output is now substantial enough, and its survivability is still high enough if you're playing the Dark Ranger. I think the hero talents that when you wall, you exil heal yourself, or when you exil heal yourself, you wall, and then having Feign Death as a wall, and then having your base line 2 charges of your shield wall, survival of the fittest, that also heal you extra on top of it, is that Hunter is just so tanky at the moment that it can almost be completely unstoppable. But I would say like finishing power, burst damage, it's kind of lacking. So that's the main reason why it's held back from S or God tier for now. But it's a massive improvement from where it was before Tuesday if you're a BM Hunter main. Blood DK, I'm not really going to comment on the tank specs because I pretty much never see them. Demonology Warlock, you're going down here though for good reason. Just you have to hard cast so much. You're just as squishy as the other Warlock specs, but with more necessity to hard cast. Your pets are really easily hard countered by AoE roots. The AI on the pets, when you summon them on a pillar and then they just don't attack, or they run in line and then they stop attacking, there's just a lot of stuff with it. Myself personally, I don't feel terrible to have a season where Demo isn't that great, just because their crowd control is really infuriating. Having every DR with stun and coil and fear, they're very infuriating to fight against, and they kind of spam your screen. So I'm not totally upset with like having a season where maybe Demo isn't on top. And Affliction has not had a season, and I don't even know how long it's been. It feels like a very long time. So having them trade off for one season, at least might not be the biggest deal. But for Demo, giving them more access to more instant cast, despite the damage buffs that they received, I still don't see them being in too great of a spot. Now, Destro, I was expecting to see this one get spammed a lot, and I didn't see it. I've only like observed it from other players' streams, so it's very limited as far as what is it going to be able to do. Now it's got 2 builds, one with focus on instant cast damage. I think that build got nerfed a bit with the nerfs to Wither, but then the hard casted builds with Chaos Bolt, which could be really scary. I'd seen it before the buffs, and it actually didn't feel that bad. So I can only assume that based on it not feeling that bad before the buffs, that it's going to feel even better than it did before. Now I don't necessarily know if I want to say it's better than Affliction. That's the only thing. This is like the hardest thing to say at the moment. For me, I think it's probably just like A tier. Affliction is probably still just a little bit of a cut ahead of it. I think having more instant cast burst damage, even though the Shadow Bolts aren't hitting for like a mil, they're still hitting like 600k plus. It's still competing with the burst damage of Destro, as well as having really good sustain. But it's definitely, you don't want to ignore it. It's still going to be really good. Devastation Evoker, really strong specialization at the moment. It's basically just untouchable to melee DPS with the new builds, with the new snares from Disintegrate, with the new wall damage reduction talents from the Scale Commander. You can just be a tank at times. And the move cast healing makes you really durable relative to that of like a balanced Druid. Damage output is comparable. Like I get out damaged by Devastation Evokers playing Starfall build, hitting 3 targets, and they're just disintegrating one dude. So like their single target can out damage most AoE classes. Defense is really solid. I'd say where you start to struggle can be like rogues. Getting bursted, getting caught in like stun locks can be really difficult. So I don't know if I want to say that you're God tier, but it's really close. It's really close. For now, I think we'll just put you up on S tier. I think you might be a bit better than Affliction at this point in Solo Shuffle. This one, unlike Rogue, is very easy to play as a beginner. And if you master it, which is probably not going to take too long, you're going to absolutely destroy people. Disc Priest, this is God tier. Disc Priest, just the amount of health per second it can do on top of the damage mitigation and the damage output that it can do, it basically just has everything. It's really fun to play. It's always been a super popular spec, so its representation is really high because of that, but now it's also a top performer. It's also been a while since we've had a Disc Priest season where they're good, but it feels like it's a little bit over the top. I think particularly like the fact that it can get health per second, similar to like a Preservation Evoker who's focused only on health per second, as well as the absorbs, like Rapture, just powered shield in general, like not being able to break shields. It's a really strong spec. Elemental Shaman, you're still master of ranged DPS. If you get lobbies where there's a lot of ranged classes, you can do really well. But if you get melee, it's a bit harder, but you're a lot tankier than you were in Dragonflight. So for me, I think Ellie is probably like an A tier fit. I think it's just decently well-rounded. You don't really have a lot of finishing power, but if you can slow grind games with double range, or you've mastered your kiting and your knockbacks, you can extend games long enough to where you're going to feel effective in Solo Shuffle. Enhancement Shaman, I played it a bit. I think in the hands of the best Enhancement Shamans, I'm not the best Enhancement Shaman, even though I played it at the beginning of Dragonflight to like 3,400. Right now, it's a bit different. It has a lot of keybinds. It's really keybind dense on, not very new player friendly. I've seen other enhances on the ladder, like Saul, in 3v3, not Shuffle, taking games off like the best Rogue Mage Druids in the game, which I didn't think it would ever be able to do because it just gets kited up by Frost Mage Rogue forever, as well as Rogue Warlock. I saw him fighting against WizKid, I think, on Warlock, and against Cubsy on Arcane Mage, and he was winning with an Arms Warrior, and I think Arms Warrior is not that spectacular. So Enhance definitely in the hands of the best players, I think, has to be doing pretty well now. I don't know where exactly I want to put it. It's a very hard spec to put it. I've geared my Shaman for Resto. So when I tried to play it, maybe that's another issue as well for me personally on it. I think it still has difficulty in Shuffle, getting kited, rogues, getting kited against hunters, and hunters are just so popular, kited against Devastation Evokers, even Ellie Shamans, like these high mobility classes, and they're pretty popular, right? Like hunters, and I see hunters and Dev Evokers like almost every game because they're easy to play and they're easy to do really well and get high rated on. But I don't know if I want to say it's the same as Boomkin. Maybe it is. Maybe that's a fair spot as far as it being kited in Shuffle. It doesn't have the highest synergy, right? Like when you build the ultimate comp for it, which is usually Warrior or Windwalker Shaman or maybe Rogue Shaman, it can do really well. But when you got like random comps and you get like a wizard on your team, it's pretty tough. So maybe it's fair for Solo Shuffle to say it's B tier. Feral Druid, you're doing really well. You got some buffs. I don't know how you managed to get buffs out of Blizzard here, but you got buffs here on Tuesday. You're already really tanky. That's the main advantage right now of Feral to Boomkin, is that you're just really tanky. Damage output's really high. I'd say the best 3v3 composition at the moment, ignoring Solo Shuffle, is like Hunter Feral, probably Disc or Prez, depending on what comp you're fighting. But Feral is remarkably good in the hands of like the highest skilled player. So for me, like, I want to say it's like up here with God. I'm gonna put it up here. I think it's onto the God tier for Shuffle. It's gone from the bottom to the top, bro. Like you went from the first class killed every single game, unable to do anything, to absolute monster up here. Fire Mage, I don't think is doing spectacular, even despite the buffs. Again, they just completely destroyed the build that it had with Living Bomb and Lit Fuse, and they haven't been adequately compensated for that. There's no, 6% Pyroblast damage is not enough to compensate for that. I kind of liked that it was this unique AoE kind of cleave burst spec that no other spec was like. So the fact that they removed that playstyle because it was so effective, and then if they even buff Pyroblast, then you're basically just a Frost Mage that shoots fire instead. But I think for me, I want to say it's like down here. I don't see it doing super hot in Shuffle. You're just going to get mowed down by the Hunters, mowed down by the Feral Druids. You're still really squishy. You've got basically no threat. You're probably the worst spec in Shuffle. So we'll put it down here on D tier. Frost Mage, on the other hand, I think with the popularity of Hunters and Ferals, and now even possibly Enhance a bit more, as well as Ellies, that it's not actually that insane in Shuffle. I think if you get lobbies where it's multiple melee again, like Rets and Warriors and Demon Hunters, you're just absolutely going to crush those. But any type of Hunter combination with Ellie Enhance, it's actually not that great. So for me, I'm putting Frost Mage, which is funny, right? Because it didn't even get nerfed. I'm putting Frost Mage on S tier as opposed to God tier. Still really easy to play, easy to do well on at the moment with Ice Lance. But I think in Shuffle Arena, with how the meta is shifting more and more to Hunters, like all three specs of Hunters, it can be tough, and unless you get those good lobbies. I think it's the main reason that I'm holding it back from God tier for now. Frost Death Knight, this is a tough one for me because I feel like its survivability is really high. Its overall damage, not going to be competing necessarily with Unholy, but I don't think it's that bad. Now it's a little comp dependent, so much like Enhance, so maybe it's fair to put it here on B tier for now, but I really don't think I think it's probably pretty underrated. However, if you fight like multiple ranged, it's hard to group them together. It's hard to get cleave, and right now there's a lot of that going on. So I could see that, especially with like your best synergy partners are probably like a Warrior, a Windwalker, or Dev Evoker, or something like that. Dev Evoker's a bit popular, and Demon Hunter, and Demon Hunter's not doing too great. So it's probably going to be held back a bit. Fury Warrior, I think, is honestly probably like now it's on like the A tier. I think that it gets like just kited around and ragdolled by Ellies and Hunters and Dev Evokers and Mages, and those are also really popular. But it can do really well into Shadow Priests and Affliction Warlocks. Those like stationary kind of caster DPS as opposed to focus on CC and kiting. It can still do really well there, but it got so many nerfs to a lot of its abilities that I think it's going to be noticeably weaker. Still going to feel really strong at everything that's below it, or even on the same tier as it likely, except maybe Arcane. But yeah, it's fallen a bit. Demon Hunter, I think is actually kind of like sleeper really good, but also at the moment really bad. It's like I feel like it's like one buff away from completely dominating the entire game and being the most infuriating thing ever. But right now, where do we feel like it is? It's probably like here in the B tiers. Maybe a bit better than Frost or close to Frost. I think having MS and having more synergy with other classes makes it maybe slightly better than Frost Death Knight Solo Shuffle. But it's very squishy, unlike it used to be. Obviously, they're working on reducing self-healing, and some of the first specs to get those nerfs were like Demon Hunter, Boomkin, Warlock in general, changing from Drain Life to Hellstone and removing some of the self-healing. Whereas a lot of these other classes, like Hunter particularly, got their self-healing buffed. So it's kind of like they're working against themselves a little bit as far as tuning. Like, hey, we're trying to make the game healthy. DPS won't heal as much, but then we made Hunters heal for so much, and so it's like these are like working in opposite of each other. These are opposite goals, but that's probably one of the main reasons why I think it's coming in to be a bit more of a mid position. Holy Priest, hard to say. In Shuffle, I don't know what it is exactly with Holy. Like, it just doesn't do as much overall damage, I guess. It's not really like a burst meta. It's kind of like a sustained meta. It's probably just going to feel kind of mid, I think. Holy Paladin, it's maybe a bit better. You're a bit tankier, but I still think you have the same weaknesses. I really think Holy Paladin's probably not going to get super great until we see like the rework coming in 11.0.5, but it's probably a little better. So I think it's fair to put it like kind of like mid rank here, but behind Holy Priest. Again, if you're on the left of this tier, that means you're the best of it. So only compare range to range and melee to melee. But yeah, that's the breakdown here. Our Marksmanship Hunter, I think, is the best spec in the game. I think you're just completely unkillable. You do so much damage, and it's all single target. There's no pad. There's no like little dots, AoEing out here. Your DPS is absolutely through the roof. Instant CC is really good. It's remarkable, and it's going to get even better. It didn't get any nerfs, and it's going to get even better in 11.0.5. I think like Hunter Feral and Hunter Rogue are likely the comps that replace Rogue Lock and Mage Lock. They seem so good right now. Mistweaver, on the other hand, not that great. You might get some lobbies where you can fist weave and hard counter like double dot comps and feel good there, but overall I think it's not that great in arena, and you just keep getting healing nerfs, when in reality in BG Blitz I think that they just need to add certain debuffs to like the flag. When you're holding the flag as a Mistweaver, that your mobility is more limited. That's the main culprit for why they're so great in Battleground Blitz at the moment, is just like the mobility. So bringing their mobility down while they're interacting with objectives, I think would get them better in live for BG Blitz without totally obliterating them in arena, but you're kind of getting obliterated in arena. Outlaw Rogue, I think people are sleeping on this, bro. I'm doing it, bro. I think Outlaw Rogue is remarkably good. I think it can do insane damage. I had a game against an Outlaw Rogue the other day. I was playing Starfall build, again max AoE, and he was attacking one character and did more DPS than I was doing. This spec is the most slept on spec in the game. Like, everybody's talking about Sub, and Sub is really good. Ass is really good, but like Outlaw has not gone anywhere. Outlaw is still easily competing here at the highest level. Pres Evoker, still probably God tier. Maybe a little bit weaker now. I think like some of the burst healing with Living Flame is probably going to where you feel it the most, but it's still got really crazy throughput. There's a Pres Evoker that healed against me in a Warlock, and he held over, I think, 1 million HPS the entire game, and it was like a 4-minute game. Just consistently held it. So I can't in good faith believe that Pres isn't still like really God tier. Not doing the tank specs here. Resto Shaman, I think is a decent pick. I'm going to put it up here onto A tier for now. I think it's got decent overall throughput. Main weakness for Resto Shaman is when you get attacked by like Assassination Rogue Death Knight or something like that. Like, it's just very tough to survive in those situations where you get trained. Resto Druid, very similarly. I'm going to put it a bit behind Resto Druid or Resto Shaman, but when you get Purge classes, again with Hunter's new and improved Purge, it can be really tough with the overall amount of damage the classes have. Your HPS is a bit lower. You're more susceptible to Purge, and your HPS is lower. These are the main reasons that you're not competing with Disc or Pres. But again, we haven't had a Disc Pres meta in a while. Honestly, I'm kind of somewhat okay, even though like when I fight it on my Boomkin, I'm raging, but of having like this type of different meta, because we never had like a meta with these specs in this order, and like I don't even know how long, but somewhere in here. Rep Paladin, you're probably still B tier, somewhere in here with Enhance. Your healing is decent, damage is okay, but you get really exploited by the kiting and mobility. Probably tough to crack some of the defense of some of the best specs in the game as well. It's not awful, but not amazing. So just kind of come in here in B tier. Shadow Priest. Some people think that it's like really low or something now. I don't think it's that bad. I think they're really tanky. I think you can actually do well into the Hunter comps, like specifically. For me, I want to say it's at least A. Maybe even like close to the best of the A tier or like close to the S tier. I still think that it is really good. Maybe these guys are starting to outshine it a bit, but like the tankiness, and that's like the main thing that makes a class really good, generally speaking, in Arena, is like how close to immortal are you? And it's pretty, near close to immortal. Subtlety Rogue at maximum capacity and maximum potential, absolutely crazy specialization. I'm putting it up here for right now. Just has high kill potential. It's able to solo classes. It's really strong, really strong at the moment. But if you're new to it, you're not going to feel really strong. So this is, again, a spec that you're going to invest for the long term. Survival Hunter, it is definitely not bad. It's doing as much damage as Boomkins. It's doing really top tier level damage. I'd say main problem is that you're just not fully ranged. And you've got a lot of AoE that breaks CC, and you seem more CC dependent than MM Hunter can just kind of attack and win sometimes, where Survival doesn't feel like it can do that. It kind of needs CC, and if the CC breaks, then it becomes tough. So it's probably a little bit lower, but I'd say it's like somewhere in here, probably with Fury Warrior. You probably could deal with classes like Ellie's a bit better than Fury Warrior because you have more range damage, but you'll struggle with other things that Fury doesn't, which is like the tanky DPS caster, but not maybe even not. I think Survival is definitely slept on. Unholy DK, I'm gonna have too many god tier specs, dude. I think maybe for Shuffle we'll drop Feral down. I don't really want to though. I swear these things are all that good. I'm gonna put Unholy DK up here. I think Unholy DK is super powerful at the moment. Really tanky, tons of damage, even despite the nerf that it got. Really tanky, tons of damage. I think a lot of people who play Death Knight who might be thinking about competing in the tournaments might have a bit of bias because they want their spec to be as powerful as possible because their livelihood to feed their families is on the line with it. But when we're just looking at the data of it, this seems like a completely bonkers spec. Like I could see in 3v3 like DK Hunter, DK Assassination Rogue, maybe DK Outlaw Rogue, potentially DK Feral, DK Warlock. Like DK has a ton of options. Windwalker, you're going to struggle with how good the Hunters are and how good the Rogues are. I think that's like the main problem. You get kited by the Hunters, you get stun locked by the Rogues, but you're really good into pretty much everything else. So for me, I'm probably going to put you at like the best of the A tier. For now, I think your damage output is higher, your defense potential is higher than the B tier for sure. If not, you're like really close to like S tier. But I'll leave you on A tier for now. AUG, I don't get a lot of data. I think I got one yesterday and they went 0-6. So I don't know if it's like some people just have no idea what they're doing on AUG Evoker, and then other people are just insane. Because sometimes in 3v3, like DK AUG or Rogue AUG, you see about in Shuffle, it doesn't seem that great. So for me, I'm going to put AUG down here in C tier for right now. Do remember that if you're looking at this now at the end of the video, if you're on the left of the tier, it means I think you're the best of that. So like best, second, third, fourth, fifth, maybe Assassination Rogue is here. Moving down like that, maybe this should be here. Actually, a little bit more like this. We'll just reorganize this tier list again, so make sure it's going like left to right as far as like what I think is the best on that tier. And then we'll see where I think this looks about where I would want it to be. But that's my experience from playing it a lot. Like I have 5 classes now that have their elite sets, playing around 2K MMR on a ton of different roles. From what I've observed as far as the capacity and potential of every specialization so far, that these are kind of the top performers, and you're likely gonna struggle a bit if you're picking towards the bottom side of it. So thank you guys for tuning into the video. Hope you guys enjoyed this update, and I will see you in the next one.